Ethan Parker adjusted the strap of his messenger bag. Glancing at his watch, it was nearly 8 p.m., and the office building behind him buzzed with people still catching up on last-minute tasks. Another late night, he thought, as he began his usual walk home through the bustling streets of the city. The chill in the autumn air forced him to zip up his jacket. As he walked past the brightly lit cafes and food carts, the streets gradually grew quieter, transforming into a more isolated section of town. The crowds thinned out, and the neon signs above stores flickered. Ethan knew this part of the city well. He'd walked it countless times, but tonight felt different. Then he saw her. Huddled beneath a lamppost at the corner of the street sat a woman, her hair tangled, and a frayed coat draped around her shoulders. A small duffel bag lay beside her, filled with what looked like all her belongings. Ethan's eyes drifted to the way she sat, upright, with a quiet dignity. Despite her weathered appearance, she wasn't panhandling or begging for attention. Instead, she hummed softly, as if singing just for herself. Something about her stillness caught Ethan off guard. He'd passed countless homeless people on these streets before, but there was something different about her, a sense of resilience, of grace that seemed oddly out of place on the street corner. He hesitated, glancing back at her as he walked a few steps further. "Keep moving," he told himself. "You've done your part, donated clothes, volunteered on weekends, enough to feel like a good person." But something gnawed at him, a nagging feeling that tonight was different. Before he knew it, his feet were carrying him back to her. "Hey," Ethan said gently, crouching down to meet her gaze. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up, startled. Her deep brown eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. She looked to be in her late 20s, though the lines of exhaustion on her face made her seem older. "I'm fine," she said, her voice soft but steady. She gave him a polite smile, as if trying to reassure him, though there was no mistaking the weariness behind it. Ethan shifted awkwardly, not sure what to say next. Do you need anything? Food? Coffee?" She paused, considering his offer. "I wouldn't say no to coffee," she admitted, her lips curving slightly in the hint of a smile. Ethan felt a small surge of relief, as if her acceptance of the offer validated his decision to stop. "There's a place just a block from here," he said. "Can I get you something warm?" She nodded. "That'd be nice." A few minutes later, they sat side by side on a bench near a coffee stand. Ethan handed her a steaming cup of black coffee and a sandwich wrapped in paper. She took the cup carefully, as if savoring the warmth radiating from it. "Thanks," she said quietly. "No problem," Ethan replied, taking a sip from his own cup. For a while, they sat in silence, the sounds of the city humming around them. Ethan found himself wondering how someone like her had ended up here, on this bench, in this situation, but he knew better than to pry. "I'm Ethan, by the way," he said eventually, offering his name as a peace offering. "Maya," she replied, without hesitation. Ethan smiled. "Nice to meet you, Maya." Maya gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. There was no bitterness in her tone, no trace of resentment or anger, only a quiet acceptance. It made Ethan uneasy in a way he couldn't explain. "So, how long have you been out here?" he asked cautiously, hoping he wasn't overstepping. Maya took a moment before answering. "A few months," she said simply. "It's not too bad, once you get used to it." Ethan frowned. The thought of someone getting used to homelessness made his chest tighten. "I'm sorry," he said softly, unsure of what else to say. Maya shrugged, as if to say, "It is what it is. Everyone has their story," she added, almost as an afterthought. Ethan wanted to ask more, to understand how she'd ended up here, but before he could, she changed the subject. "You work nearby?" Maya asked, nodding toward the direction he'd come from. "Yeah, just a few blocks over. In marketing," Ethan said. "It's busy, most of the time." Maya gave a small smile. You look like someone who's always busy. Ethan chuckled. That obvious. Ha! A little. As they sat together, something shifted in Ethan. He wasn't sure what it was. Maybe the way Maya spoke, or the calmness she carried despite everything. But he felt drawn to her, as if meeting her on this bench wasn't just coincidence. He glanced at the time. The office party was tomorrow night, and his boss, Caroline, had reminded him more than once to bring a +1 if possible. He had no plans of doing so, but now, sitting next to Maya, an idea began to form in his mind. Hey, he said, almost hesitantly, I know this might sound strange, but there's this office party tomorrow night. It's nothing fancy, just a bunch of people drinking and pretending to have fun. He paused, gauging her reaction. Would you want to come with me? Maya blinked, clearly surprised. To an office party? Yeah. Ethan shrugged, trying to play it off casually. It's really no big deal. Just thought it might be nice to get off the streets for a night. You'd be my guest. For a moment, Maya seemed to study him, as if trying to figure out if he was serious. You don't even know me, she said quietly. Ethan smiled. I know your name, and sometimes, that's enough. Maya looked down at her coffee, her expression unreadable. Ethan felt a twinge of nervousness. Maybe he'd overstepped. But then, to his surprise, she gave a small nod. Okay, she said. I'll come. The next morning, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Maya. He had offered her something simple, a night at a party, but it felt like so much more. It felt like the start of something he didn't yet understand. He spent the day preparing for the evening, making sure everything was in place. He found a thrift store downtown and bought a simple, elegant dress and some essentials. If Maya was going to the party, she deserved to feel like she belonged. That evening, when he returned to the spot where they had met, Maya was waiting, her expression calm but curious. Ethan held out the dress, feeling oddly nervous. Ready for a night out? He asked with a grin. Maya took the dress, her lips curving into a small, genuine smile, the first real smile he had seen from her. Let's do this, she said. Ethan led Maya to a nearby motel, where he'd rented a room for her to freshen up before the party. The room was simple but clean, and Maya looked around it quietly, almost unsure how to react. She ran her fingers across the edge of the bedspread, as if it had been years since she'd seen a real bed. There's a shower in the bathroom, Ethan said, handing her a small bag filled with toiletries. Take your time. I'll wait out here. Maya gave him a grateful glance, her expression softening for the first time since they met. Thanks, Ethan, she said softly, disappearing into the bathroom. While she was inside, Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed, tapping his foot anxiously. He wasn't sure why he felt so nervous. This wasn't just about the party anymore. It was about giving Maya something she hadn't had in a long time, a chance to feel normal again. After about an hour, the bathroom door creaked open, and Maya stepped out. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Gone was the weary, street-worn woman he'd met under the lamppost. Maya now stood in the doorway wearing the simple dress he'd bought, her dark hair washed and combed, hanging loosely around her shoulders. She looked uncertain but beautiful, like someone who was slowly remembering who she used to be. How do I look? She asked quietly, fidgeting with the hem of the dress. Ethan smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. You look amazing. Maya gave a small, shy smile, and for the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of something he hadn't noticed before: hope. The ride to the office party was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Maya looked out the window as the city lights flickered past, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Ethan stole a few glances at her, wondering what was going through her mind. When they arrived at the venue, a sleek rooftop bar overlooking the city, Maya hesitated at the entrance. Are you sure this is a good idea? She asked nervously. Ethan offered her a reassuring smile. I promise, you'll be fine. Just stick with me. Inside, the room buzzed with laughter and chatter. Ethan's coworkers were scattered around, sipping cocktails and mingling in small groups. As soon as they entered, a few heads turned toward Maya, curiosity flickering in their eyes. But Ethan ignored the stares and guided her toward the bar. "Hey, Parker," called Caroline, his boss, from across the room. She sauntered over, her sharp eyes scanning Maya with interest. "And who's this?" "This is Maya," Ethan said, keeping his tone casual. "A friend of mine." Caroline raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but she smiled warmly. "Well, Maya, welcome. Any friend of Ethan's is a friend of ours." Maya nodded politely, though Ethan could sense her discomfort. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze under the bar, offering silent reassurance. As the evening wore on, Maya began to relax. She laughed at Ethan's stories, even chatted with a few of his coworkers. It was as if, for a few hours, the weight she carried had lifted, allowing her to be someone else, someone free. Later that night, as the party began to wind down, Ethan and Maya stepped out onto the balcony to catch some air. The city sprawled beneath them, glittering under the night sky. Maya leaned against the railing, her eyes distant. "It feels strange," she murmured, "being here, like I don't belong." "You belong," Ethan said firmly, standing beside her. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Maya gave him a sidelong glance, her expression softening. "You're kind, Ethan. Too kind." Ethan shrugged. "It's not kindness. I just think everyone deserves a break once in a while." Maya smiled, but there was a sadness in it. "I used to think that, too," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city below. Ethan stayed quiet, sensing that she was about to tell him something important. "I wasn't always like this," she began, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I had a life, an apartment, a job, people who cared about me. I played the violin in an orchestra. Music was everything to me." "What happened?" Ethan asked gently. Maya exhaled slowly, as if releasing a burden she'd carried for too long. "I lost someone," she said. "Someone I loved. And after that, everything just fell apart." Ethan felt a pang of empathy. He knew what it was like to lose someone, though perhaps not in the way Maya had. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Maya nodded, blinking back tears. "It's okay. It's just hard to climb back up when you've fallen so far." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort. In that moment, he realized how much he admired Maya, not just for surviving, but for still holding on to a part of herself, however small. As they left the party and walked back through the quiet streets, Ethan felt something shift between them, a connection that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just kindness or pity that drew him to Maya anymore. It was respect. When they reached the motel, Maya stopped at the entrance and turned to face him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Ethan smiled. "It's nothing, really." Maya shook her head. "No, it's not nothing. You've been good to me, and I appreciate it." There was a pause, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might hug him, but instead, she gave him a small, shy smile and slipped inside the motel. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring after her. He knew their story was only just beginning, and that whatever happened next, it was bound to change both of them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling more energized than he had in months. Something about his encounter with Maya had shifted his perspective, making him see the world and himself differently. At work, he found himself distracted, thinking about Maya and wondering how he could help her beyond just one night. He knew that giving her clothes and food wasn't enough. If she was going to rebuild her life, she needed more support, opportunities, and maybe even a way to reconnect with the things she had lost. An idea began to form in Ethan's mind. It was risky, and he wasn't sure if Maya would go for it, but he had to try. That evening, after work, he stopped by the motel where Maya was staying. She opened the door, looking surprised but pleased to see him. "I have a crazy idea," Ethan said with a grin. Maya raised an eyebrow, amused. I'm listening. Ethan took a deep breath. How would you feel about finding your brother? Maya's smile faltered at Ethan's question. For a moment, her calm demeanor cracked, and Ethan saw the hesitation and pain beneath it. My brother? She whispered, as if the words were foreign to her. Ethan nodded, though he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. You mentioned him the other night. I thought maybe reconnecting with him could help. Maya looked down, her hands gripping the edge of the doorframe. I don't know if that's a good idea, she muttered. Ethan waited patiently, sensing that Maya needed time to process the thought. He could see the conflict in her eyes. Part of her wanted to believe that reconnecting with her brother might bring healing, but another part feared the pain it could reopen. It's been years, Ethan, she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. I don't even know if he'd want to see me. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, meeting her gaze gently. You won't know unless you try. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Then, slowly, Maya gave a reluctant nod. Okay, she whispered. Let's try. Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into the search for Aaron, Maya's brother. With Maya's permission, he scoured social media platforms and public databases, tracking down every possible lead. Maya was guarded about her family history, revealing only small pieces at a time. Aaron had been her closest family member, her protector, her friend, until the loss of Maya's fiancé drove them apart. Their relationship had fractured under the weight of grief, leaving Maya alone and vulnerable. Ethan's search finally led him to an address, a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Aaron Brooks. The name was still listed in the phone directory. When Ethan told Maya what he'd found, her face went pale. I can't just show up after all this time, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan reached out and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to do it alone, he said. I'll go with you. Maya hesitated for a moment, then gave a small, grateful nod. The next afternoon, Ethan and Maya stood outside Aaron's apartment. The neighborhood was quiet, with children playing in the distance and the scent of grilled food wafting through the air. Maya looked uneasy, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. You ready? Ethan asked gently. Maya swallowed hard. As ready as I'll ever be. With a deep breath, she knocked on the door. A few moments passed, and then the door creaked open. A man stood in the doorway, a man who looked older and wearier than Maya remembered, but whose eyes were unmistakably familiar. Aaron. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Maya, he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. Maya nodded, her eyes welling with tears. It's me. Aaron stood frozen for a second, and then, without warning, he pulled her into a tight embrace. Maya collapsed into his arms, sobbing quietly as years of pain and separation melted away. Ethan watched from the side, his heart swelling at the sight of their reunion. I thought I lost you, Aaron whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I thought you were gone. I'm here, Maya whispered back, her voice trembling. I'm still here. The three of them sat around Aaron's small kitchen table, cups of tea in hand. Maya explained her journey, the hardships she had faced, and how she had ended up on the streets. Aaron listened quietly, guilt flickering in his eyes. I should have looked for you, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I thought, after everything that happened, you wouldn't want anything to do with me. Maya shook her head. We were both hurting, Aaron. I never blamed you. I just didn't know how to ask for help. Aaron reached across the table and took her hand. I'm here now, he said firmly. We'll figure this out together. Ethan watched the exchange in silence, feeling like an outsider in the best possible way. He knew this reunion wouldn't erase all the pain, but it was a start, a chance for both Maya and Aaron to heal and move forward. Over the next few days, Aaron helped Maya get back on her feet. He offered her a place to stay in his apartment, And with Ethan's encouragement, Maya began to explore the possibility of reconnecting with her passion for music. One evening, Ethan surprised Maya with a gift, a second-hand violin he had found at a local shop. Maya stared at it in disbelief, her hands trembling as she took it from the case. "I can't believe you did this," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Ethan smiled. "You said music was everything to you. I thought it might help." Maya ran her fingers along the strings, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. "It's been so long," she murmured. "Take your time," Ethan said softly. "There's no rush." That night, for the first time in years, Maya played. The sound was tentative at first, the notes shaky and uncertain, but as she played on, the music grew stronger, filling the apartment with a haunting, beautiful melody. Ethan sat in silence, mesmerized by the sound. In that moment, he knew that Maya was finally beginning to find her way back to herself. With Aaron's support and Ethan by her side, Maya began to rebuild her life. She enrolled in a community music program, slowly regaining the confidence she had lost. Ethan watched with pride as she blossomed, her spirit growing stronger with each passing day. Their friendship deepened, and though neither of them spoke about it directly, the bond between them hinted at something more. Ethan found himself thinking about Maya constantly, her smile, her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she played the violin. One evening, as they walked through the park after one of her performances, Ethan finally gathered the courage to say what had been on his mind for weeks. "Maya," he said softly, "I care about you, more than just as a friend." Maya stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, afraid of what she might say. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "I care about you too, Ethan," she whispered. Ethan felt a wave of relief and happiness wash over him. In that moment, he knew that their chance meeting on the street corner had been the beginning of something extraordinary. A journey of healing, redemption, and love. As the weeks passed, Maya's confidence with the violin grew. She joined a small community orchestra, where she began rehearsing for their upcoming winter concert. The practice sessions weren't easy. Her hands would sometimes shake with nerves, and doubts would creep in late at night. But every time she thought of giving up, Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "Take your time. There's no rush." Aaron attended her rehearsals whenever he could, cheering her on from the back row. Having her brother back in her life was both a comfort and a challenge. There were still old wounds that needed time to heal, but the simple fact that they were trying was enough for now. Ethan, too, was always there, waiting for her after rehearsals with a warm smile and words of encouragement. Their relationship had deepened into something more than friendship, though they moved cautiously, letting things unfold naturally. For Maya, it was a new kind of love, one built on trust and patience, not fear and loss. The night of the winter concert arrived sooner than Maya had expected. The auditorium was small but packed, the air buzzing with anticipation. Maya stood backstage, clutching her violin, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan found her just before the performance began. He placed his hands on her shoulders and looked into her eyes. "You've got this," he said softly. Maya gave him a nervous smile, grateful for his steady presence. "I just don't want to mess up," she whispered. "You won't," Ethan assured her. "Even if you do, it won't matter. What matters is that you're here, playing again. That's everything." Maya took a deep breath, his words grounding her. She gave him a quick nod, and as the conductor called the orchestra to the stage, she stepped forward, violin in hand. The lights dimmed, and the audience fell silent. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the familiar warmth of the instrument settle in her hands. Then the conductor raised his baton, and the first notes filled the air. The music was soft and tentative at first, but with each passing moment, Maya's confidence grew. The bow moved gracefully across the strings, and soon the entire orchestra swelled around her. lifting the music to breathtaking heights. In the audience, Ethan watched with pride, his heart full as he saw the woman he'd met on a cold street corner transform into someone radiant and whole. Beside him, Aaron wiped away a tear, overwhelmed by the sight of his sister reclaiming her place in the world. As the final note hung in the air, the audience erupted into applause. Maya lowered her violin, her chest heaving with the effort, but her face glowing with joy. She had done it. In the weeks following the concert, Maya's life began to change. Word of her performance spread through the local music community, and she was offered a spot in a more prestigious orchestra. It was a dream she never thought she would reclaim. But with the opportunity came a difficult decision. The new orchestra was based in another city, a fresh start, but one that would take her away from Ethan and Aaron. One evening, she sat with Ethan at their favorite cafe, her heart heavy with uncertainty. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I want to take the opportunity, but I'm afraid of losing what we have." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "Maya, you've spent so long trying to survive. Now you finally get to live." Maya looked into his eyes, tears threatening to spill over. "But what about us?" she whispered. Ethan smiled gently. "I'll be here, no matter what. This isn't the end for us. It's just the beginning." After much thought, Maya accepted the offer. Ethan and Aaron helped her pack. And though their goodbyes were bittersweet, they were filled with hope rather than sorrow. On her last night in the city, the three of them sat together in Aaron's apartment, reminiscing and laughing until the early hours of the morning. "I'm going to miss you both so much," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. Aaron pulled her into a hug. "You've got this, sis. I'm proud of you." Ethan held her hand as they stood by the door. "We'll find a way," he whispered. "I promise." Maya smiled through her tears. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. Maya's new life in the orchestra was both challenging and exhilarating. The work was demanding, but every time she stepped on stage, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Ethan and Maya stayed connected, their bond growing stronger despite the distance. They visited each other whenever they could, and each reunion felt like coming home. 1 year later, Ethan stood in the audience of a grand concert hall, watching Maya perform as the lead soloist for the first time. The music soared, filling the space with a beauty that was both haunting and uplifting. As the final note resonated through the hall, the audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Ethan clapped until his hands stung, his heart full of pride and love. After the concert, Maya found him backstage, her eyes shining with happiness. "You were incredible," Ethan said, pulling her into his arms. Maya smiled, resting her head against his chest. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Ethan kissed her forehead, his heart brimming with gratitude. "We did this together," he whispered, and in that moment, they both knew that no matter where life took them, they would always find their way back to each other. Years later, Ethan and Maya sat together on the porch of a small house by the sea, a place they had found together, where they could build a life filled with music, love, and laughter. Maya's violin rested on her lap, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, she began to play a soft, familiar tune, the same melody she had hummed the night Ethan first found her beneath the street lamp. Ethan listened, his heart full of gratitude for the journey they had shared. It hadn't been easy, but every step had been worth it, because in the end, they had found something far more precious than what they had lost. They had found each other,